There is a first quadrant terminal point on the unit circle where cosine t equals 2 sine t. Identify the false statement. First, let's figure out what they are, what cosine and sine are. So we're going to use our identity sine squared t plus cosine squared t equals 1. Let's replace cosine with 2 sine. So that's sine squared t plus 2 sine t squared equals 1. So sine squared t plus, and then we're going to square this. So 4 sine squared t equals 1. Then we have 1 sine squared t and 4 sine squared t. So those add together to 5 sine squared t equals 1. Sine squared t equals 1 over 5. Sine t equals 1 over the square root of 5. But we don't like when there's radicals in the denominator. So we're going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 5. And that gives us the square root of 5 over 5, and that is sine t. So this is true. Now let's figure out what cosine is. So going back to this identity here, we now know what sine is. So we have square root of 5 over 5 squared plus cosine squared t equals 1. This squared is 5 over 25, but let's just immediately rewrite that as 1 over 5 plus cosine squared t equals 1, or let's just write 5 over 5. Cosine squared t equals 4 over 5. So cosine t equals the square root of 4, which is 2, over the square root of 5, but we don't like radicals in the bottom, so once we multiply the square root of 5 over the square root of 5, we get 2 times the square root of 5 over 5. This is the cosine value. Now, what is the secant? Well, that's the reciprocal of this. Actually, let's just go back to this point. Cosine t equals 2 over the square root of 5, therefore secant will equal the square root of 5 over 2, which is right here. So that's true. Now, what is the tan value? So we know sine is the square root of 5 over 5, and then we just have to divide this by cosine, which is this value here, but let's just use this simpler value, 2 over the square root of 5. We're going to divide by that, which means we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is the square root of 5 over 2, which gives us 5 over 10, which is 1/2. So this is not 2, it's 1/2. So the answer to this problem is C. Let's just quickly make sure that this last one is true. We have sine t times cosine t. So sine is the square root of 5 over 5. Cosine is 2 over the square root of 5. Those cancel, and this is 2 over 5, so this is true as well. The answer to this problem is C.